Hi everybody, my name is Luis Vargas, and in this occasion I'm going to talk about dependency injection. In specific, I'm going to talk about injecting constant values into any component or into services. Okay, in previous video we saw how to create dependency injection and how to inject values using the providers. In this case we saw that we use the provider use class and we use the do nothing. We also have other providers and we can also use the use value. Let me see if I can find one from use value. Okay, it's not here, but we can use also use values. So what I'm gonna do now is just create a new app configuration. It's gonna be a constant value, and then I'm just gonna inject it into the app component in here. So why I'm gonna to inject app configuration? In most of the cases, app configuration is a constant or a list of values that sometimes comes from for example, in Spring MVC they come from a YAML file or a properties file. Also they could come from an XML file, but recently they just added the they can also come from a Java file in Spring MVC. So in Dart we can do kind of the same, but in Dart it's preferable to use only Dart instead of using another XML file or YAML file or whatever kind of file, because it's easier to maintain, because you have IDE help, because you can autocomplete anything if you want. So let's create another class. In this case, that class is gonna be called appConfig. It's gonna be a constant class. A new file, and then let's call it appconfig.dart, and this one is just gonna contain some Dart code. Let me pause. Okay, so each contain some Dart code, and the Dart code should be as follows. Let me find it first. I don't know where I did it. Component appconfig. Here it is. So let's create the appconfig file, and let's create a class called appconfig. This class is gonna use this add injectable. Remember that we put the add injectable mostly for client-side applications. However, is the most recommended for anything that we want to inject. If we want to make something injectable, we most of the time should annotate it with add injectable. We can do alt enter and import the library to correct that error. And also we're gonna create a configuration. We can create as many configurations as we want. So this appconfig file only contains two attributes: the API endpoint. As you can see, it doesn't have any type. It could be anything, and also it contains a title. So let's create a new config, and now how can we use this one? Okay, in the app component we can go again, and let's see the app component HTML, and as you can see, this one has the my spheres here Angular2 application. So let's do something a little bit different, and instead of using this value, we're gonna use the the value coming from the appconfig, this value dependency injection. But before, we need to inject this configuration, this config one. In general, I prefer to call constant values using upper snake case. It should be, for me, it should be something like this, config one. However, I'm not completely sure. This is Java style. Most of the time Dart follows Java style, but it's not always the case because Dart is different from Java, so you shouldn't always follow Java. So let's say, to me, if this has something else like config, let's say this could be called main config. This should be the name. However, I don't know exactly. To me, this should be the name, but it's up to you if you want to follow this convention or not. I think that Dart is saying that we shouldn't follow this convention and we should follow a camel case, something like this, main config. But this one I prefer use this camel case only for variables, not for constants. For constants I prefer to use upper lowercase. I'm gonna continue using camel case like before, config1, because the sample says use this way, but again it's up to you. I would prefer upper snake case instead of just camel case. Then it's okay, so we need to inject this configuration into app component in here. So to inject it is as simple as doing comma, and then we can just do app config. Config is a computer app config, and then we can do alt enter, import library. Oops, the name of this, I should change it. Okay, let me change those names because right now we are in version 4 and I don't want this. Let me change it to just dependency injection. So in here we have a small problem. If we leave it like this app config, internally the injector is gonna do new app config, and we don't want to do new because in fact it's a constant and we want to use this constant value. We could put this constant value in whatever file we want. It doesn't matter the place. What it matters is only the importing. So app component, let's go back and let's provide this using a constant provider, a const provider, and in here we're gonna set app config, and we are gonna use a value, and in here we can use the value config1, this one. So in previous video we saw that we cannot use constants provider and we cannot use a new in here because we cannot provide we cannot pass values to a constant, variables to a constant, because that will convert the constant into a variable and wouldn't make sense. In JavaScript and TypeScript you can do that. I don't think it's a good idea, but they decide to do it, so it's up to them. I'm not sure exactly how they are gonna handle this, mostly because I think the annotations are not constants, are variables, so that means it's gonna be a little bit slower, and this is mostly for performance. That this does this, and the most important in that is performance. So I think that they doesn't allow to use variables inside a constant because of that. So however, config1 is a constant, so we can pass a constant inside a const provider. So we already passed this value, but who is gonna use it is gonna use it by the app component. So we need to create an app component, the constructor, and we need to pass the value app config. So we need to say app config, and then we can say app config, and in here we are passing the value app config, and we are using this value config1. You can still be thinking, why don't just use the value directly? It's better in this way because this way is more testable and also is more interchangeable than passing the value. We saw that in the first first video of this series of this module of dependency injection. So now I'm just gonna create a variable called title. Let's call a string title, and then here I could say that the title is gonna be equals. I could say that this is also final. Let me see if it works as final string title. And let's say that title is gonna be equals to @config dot title. So it looks that it like it. Let's put it in a different line, and then the only thing that I need to do now is just use this value here. So in here I'm just gonna say title. Then let's run this and see if it works. Index. Okay, let me a second, because I have this in a different screen, the browser in a different screen, so let me a second. So okay, here we go. It looks that we have an error because it's not showing anything. So let's see what is the error, and let's see if I can correct it. @config, no provider for @config. That's real. Let me check why. Oh, sorry, I know what is the error. The error is that I put it inside the directive, and it shouldn't be inside here. It should be inside the const provider list. So let's remove it from here. Let's put this in the same line, and let's add the providers const, and let's add the provider. Let me see. Now it should work. So let's run it again. Okay, so now it's working, and as you can see, now the title has changed to dependency injection. Previously it was Angular2 Dart application or something like that, I don't remember. So in here you can see that I can inject any value, any constant value, and I don't need to pass anything special, just need to do that. So there is another way to injecting constant values. For example, we can inject the same title in a slightly different way using what's the name? So what is the other using a factory? Instead, the other one is the API endpoint. So this value could be used for getting a JSON server, maybe a JSON service, a remote service that sends us the values from heroes. But in our case, we're not going to use it right now. What I want to show is how to inject actually this dependency injection string directly without using a class. So how do we use the class? Let me a second. Okay, so I'm just gonna inject this value directly without using any class, like in this case. So how do we inject a value without using a class? It's kind of difficult. Most of the time we shouldn't do that, because dependency injection is not for injecting values directly. It's mostly for injecting classes, but let's try to do it. So we already saw the app config with title. Let's say we don't want this, and let's say we want a string. Let's say we want the title, this title. So I'm gonna comment this, and also I'm gonna comment this line. And what I'm gonna do now is just create a constructor, app component, and I'm just gonna say this dot title. So what I'm gonna do is just inject the value directly. For this, what I'm gonna do is just use a factory instead of using the normal use value, because we cannot just do providers const, and then we cannot say const provider. We cannot just say app config or string. Can we use value? That's right. I don't know. This one is just a string, and then let's say this is wrong because this will means that we want that every time that we need a value, we will need to pass this value, and this is wrong. But let's try it. So what is the title? Let's just copy the title from here, dependency injection. Okay, component, this one. Let's try it. I don't think that it's gonna work, but let's try it. And yes, it's not working. Oh, yeah. Let's close this. And let's see the error in here. No provider for a string. And remember that I told you that this couldn't work. It doesn't have any sense, because this would mean that everything that is a string in the constructor should be this value, and we don't want that. And also this one is not gonna work because the class string, if we go to there, is not annotated with the add injectable. So we cannot use this, and instead we should use a constant a factory provider. And as you remember, we should do instead use factory, and a factory is a function. So this value is not going to be here. Let's use a function, and remember we cannot do this const parentheses. This will be wonderful. We can do this, and we can do this new app component. That's the something like this app component, but this is not possible in here, so I think we shouldn't do it here. In fact, we should do it into the main .dart, because it's where in here. So here we should say comma, and notice of provider, and in here we should say provide, and in here I'm gonna say use, and the token is gonna be app component. That's not gonna work. Let's try. Provide app component. I don't think this is gonna work, in fact. And use factory, and let's see if I can. Here I can use this new app component and pass the string. This should work, but I'm not completely sure because we are bootstrapping the app component. So let's try it. I don't think it's gonna work. Just let's try. Stop and run again. And it doesn't work. Oh, because the closure. Okay, so it doesn't like to have a closure here. Yeah. Add injectable. Let's copy this and let's call this add component factory. And let's use it here. And it doesn't work. Okay, so we cannot pass value because we are using a bootstrap here, that component. However, we could pass a value if it wouldn't be the add component, the main class. Let's pass this value to the hero component. Do we have a hero component? Okay, we have a hero component, so let's pass a value here, a title here. Let's undo this. There is an error here, that's why it's not working slightly. Unexpected. Oh, we forget. Okay, let's try now. I don't think it should it work. No provider for a string. This is because the add config is not the add component cannot be injected. Let's do it into the heroes component. So let's back to the add component. Let's me come here. Okay, let's see if this works again. And yes, it's working. So let's change this heroes title from the add component. Let me see if it's in the heroes component. Yeah, we have heroes here. Let's add a title variable here also. Final string. It could be non-final. So let's add a constructor here. Let's say hero component and this dot title. So in here, okay, let's see. Let's see here. Could it be? Okay. Let's try it. I don't remember exactly if this is gonna work. Okay, so let's go to add component.dat and the providers, and we're gonna create another const provider. It could be hero component and use factory. And this one is gonna be the hero component factory. Let's see if we can create it from here. Create field. Let's create it here. Add injectable. hero component factory, it will be to new hero component, and we should pass the string that should be heroes, and then in here, let's see if this works. In the hero component, instead of heroes here, we're gonna use the title. So add component has the heroes. Okay, let's go. No, there is no provider for string. So it doesn't like to passing direct values. Nope. I think I forgot something in the hero factory. I think, let me check. Okay, so it's not possible to inject it using a factory, and what we should do is instead of using a token, it's weird because I didn't know that. So hero component here and add components. In here we are providing a hero component using a factory, and it is not what we want in fact. So I'm just gonna remove this from here, and also I'm just gonna delete this. So in here, instead we should provide something for this title, and so we cannot, since we cannot provide a string or a constant value, we need to use a token. Let's call this token, let's create a token, and this token should be a little bit simple. It should be something like this: const logger, not logger, hero title token is gonna be equal to const opaque token, I don't know how to pronounce it, and it's gonna be hero title. Hero component, hero title, this is okay. This should be the value, so what we're gonna inject is this hero title token. So to inject it, we need to use the annotation at inject, and let's inject the token, and the token is gonna be hero title token. Let's copy it. Yes. So in this case, we're injecting a token. So let's try to run again to see if it works. And there is no provider for token hero title. So as you can see, this token could be anything constant and should be anything that is not repetitive. So we need to provide it here. So we should say const provider, and we should say hero title token, and we should say use class, use value, and the value is gonna be heroes. And let's see now if it works. And here we go, it works. So the value inside this token, I think, could be anything. Hero title. This is mostly for documentations, for I don't know how to say it, for declarations. This is mostly for login purposes, that you put something here. I don't know if I can leave it empty. I don't think so. Let me see. No, you cannot leave it empty. You should put always something here. it could be, I think, yes, it could be anything inside this string, whatever you want. In this case, hero, I call it hero title, and I just call hero component title. So whenever you don't pass the injector, the provider, sorry, it should tell you this hero component title doesn't exist, so it's not being provided. So it's mostly for logging purposes, like here, no provider for token hero component title. You can leave it like this. You can also leave it maybe hero component title, something like this, without title. At the end of the day, this is mostly for documentation, for logging purposes, so you can put anything in here. I think that I would put it like this because it's more accurate, more simple. Maybe this one should be called hero component title token, something like this. Control Shift X6, and now it has sense because we are passing a value, hero component title token. This is more verbose, more specific, that you're passing a token to this value. So in this way, any component could spec any value into the constructor, and it doesn't need to be another class or another component. It can just be just a value in this way, which is useful. For example, if you want to create something, a new component, you want to create it what's the name, programmatically. You don't want to create it using the HTML. You don't want to do it declaratively. So this way you can pass a value using the hero. Maybe we should put this at the top. It doesn't matter. So I hope you like this video. Don't forget to comment if you have any question. Share this video whenever you do it. It's good to me and for you also. And thank you.